All right. And just like that, we are live. How's it going? Oh, we got a very, very special RCS live going on today for you. We are joined by Martin Blazek, our Zetta product manager, to talk about all the brand new Zetta 5.22.1 features. Martin, just heads up, you're going to share your screen here. I know we have our little video on there too, just so you know. I'll do a little side by side while you get that heads up there. So, get some housekeeping out of the way because I know we have a lot of great questions for you. We're, of course, live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter Live. If you have any questions for Martin or myself, we are here to help you and show you some new features in Zetta 5.22.1. So go ahead and chime in. Of course, we have a full archive of all our past videos over at rcsworks.com/rcs-live. You see some great videos on there with Martin from 5.21.2 and 5.22.1. All those past versions, they're all in there too. Don't forget to check out your backup paths, G-Selector data exchanges, and all of that good stuff as well. We also have our hashtag Studio Spotlight. So if you want to be featured with your Zetta setup, we would love to see it and showcase you and your station. You can do that as well by emailing marketing@rcsworks.com. That's our hashtag Studio Spotlight. And let's see what else we got here. We're hiring as well. Careers, rcsworks.com/careers. You can check that out. Got some really great opportunities for you to join the RCS team. Really excited about that as well. And of course, we're on the road. Some little events here. I know we have a whole bunch going on here coming up in September and also in October as well. So you can see some great events if you're going to be out on the road and want to stop by and say hi to us, like the WABE convention. Let us know. We're here to talk about everything. Talk about Zetta, talk about G-Selector, Acquira, whatever you want to do there. As you can see, I can share Martin's screen right here. And let's just dive right into it. You know, you always hear me say this. We talk about Zetta beta users because we do about 2 to 3 releases per year for all of our products. And with Zetta, there's some really, really cool things coming down the pipeline. So we thought, why not bring Martin in here and talk about all this great stuff? So Martin, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us.
It's a pleasure. Hello, hello, hello. Good morning.
Yeah. So I know we highlighted a couple of these. And so just in no particular order for the most part, if you want a full list, of course, we do have release notes on Zetta 5.22.1. If you want to become a beta user, you can reach out to your local RCS contact and we'll get you in touch with the beta program. And of course, if any other questions or want to elaborate more on some of these features, you can always reach out to RCS support. Be more than happy to help you out there as well. So let's dive into it. Martin, what do we have for the very first brand new feature in Zetta 5.22.1?
Just making sure my audio is coming through.
Sound great.
Perfect. All right. Well, I'll start with some back-end stuff. Then we'll go to the front end. GPIO, that's an area that's frequently used by our customers for any sort of external control, whether you want to control your Zetta system from a console or whatever other external device, or you want Zetta to control something else externally. One of the places where you configure GPIO is under the system configuration screen on the command mapping tab. And here you traditionally define, hey, when I press this button, this, what we call is a GPI trigger, I want this particular operation to be executed. While I'm here in this window, I already mentioned one very important change, very noticeable change, is that when you define these commands, some of the commands, we have a big library of commands, hundreds. I haven't counted them recently, but last time it was close to somewhere between 300 to 400. And some of these commands are very sophisticated. They have 3, 4, 5 parameters sometimes. And this traditionally you would define all of this in line in this grid. And it was getting a bit cumbersome. So what we did here is that we now introduced this right panel, which kind of looks like if you ever modified or define execute commands in the logs module, this is pretty much what you see there. So here, if I pick a command, I can just go straight here and see all the command and the parameters. I can easily modify them from here. So, for example, if I want to switch to a different kind of a command, say this one here, that has 3 additional parameters, you pick your station and you set the values for the parameters, and it's all much easier than it used to be because you have this nice dedicated pane on the right. You don't have to scramble around within these little cells here. So that's one first big change that I do want to mention. These execute commands are defined in a bunch of other places. If you go to hotkeys, for example, I'll show you right here. I'll clear this key so that we can put a new execute command here. You pick, and it's the same kind of experience you're going to see here.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, notice if you've heard me in these RCS lives, I always say I preach work smarter, not harder. And notice look how Martin's working in that window, right? How we're trying to give you tools to make it easier for you. So find what that, GPIO is or execute command, and then use your keyboard to search for some of that, right? If you're looking in, let's say the on-air sequencer or just the sequencer, whatever it is, type in sequencer and find all the, the GPIOs that are tied to that. So notice how Martin is navigating as a user throughout the software.
So this is another place, definition of a queue point, a metadata card, so we've consolidated this. There used to be a kind of a mix of two different user interfaces to define this. This is all now standardized and centered around this kind of a UI that you will see in all the other places. So there's one thing I wanted to mention since we're in this window here in system config. There's one, I think anybody who defines these commands, this is not necessarily for DJs, PDs, or MDs. This is more for engineering. But I swear to God, I'm sure this is a feature that engineering will appreciate because it's just so much easier now to manage all these GPIO mappings. Now, speaking of GPIO mappings, the new feature, the big one here, is that, so I started with going to this window and to this tab, but I said, okay, anytime this GPIO comes into Zetta, that means somebody pressed a button on a console or some external device, it's going to be mapped to this command. Now, there's kind of an opposite feature of this on the output event mapping step. And that means when something happens in Zetta itself, you can notify, you can send a message or a GPIO, what we call, to an external device. You can do something on that external device, like turn the light on a console, for example. And so we have also a big library of these output events where, for example, when a sequencer gets hot spared on a different computer, you can do this. And traditionally, this only allows you to send a GPIO. So all of these mappings were really just a kind of a definitions of the GPIO you want to trigger on the external device. Well, that's still possible, and that's still the default action you're going to get when you click the plus button. But the new thing here, the really exciting one, is that you now can go directly from the output event, such as sequencer was hot spared, or audio started to play, audio stopped, spot block started, spot block ended. Again, we have a wide library of these output events, and you can map it to some other command instead. So that's a big advancement because this allows you to simplify and streamline the configuration much more. Before, people would generate a GPIO, then receive it back as GPI, map the GPI to execute command. It was rather cumbersome to get that done. So this streamlines all that configuration quite significantly and gives you tons of new functionality in return. For example, in my case, if a hot spare gets activated, I want to reconfigure my my split master sequencer to use a different device to send messages over external GPIO. So it's extremely sophisticated and extremely powerful, and I love this feature.
Nice. Right, Mark? Any questions, Mark? Let me know. Dave, any questions? Larry? Tom? How's it going, Tom? Let me know. We're here to answer questions for you. So, okay. Chugging along here.
Okay. Well, let's look at the next thing. We've Segway Editor. That's a feature that DJs love to use because it allows them to modify and tighten the segues.
Forward momentum.
Fine-tune the segues, the transitions between songs and jingles, and just really helps you make your station sound the best it can sound. Now, this module has received a lot of enhancements. Small ones, not necessarily visible, but very, very friendly. For example, if we always had the simplify the extended view, and in order to see the waveform, you had to switch to the extended view. Well, no longer you need to do that. In fact, we don't even show this overview by default at the bottom of the screen. We just show you this. So this is very good for real estate. and you see the waveforms right away. You don't have to switch anything, but that's just the beginning. You can now easily, it was kind of we streamlined the ability simply just to reposition the cursor. Before you had to click into the empty area. Now we really can click anywhere. We allow you now to, if you drag an empty area, we allow you to easily pan just using your mouse. But we also added some buttons so that you can click these if you want to pan around. So that's another way of doing it. Obviously, the third way is if you have this overview section, you can use this for panning. But again, this consumes real estate, which is kind of scarce. So if you prefer to save real estate, you have two other ways of panning: dragging here or clicking these buttons. We also will notice that these are new buttons here as well. These allow you to zoom in or zoom out, both horizontally and vertically. So if I want to see a bit more of that waveform, I can do it just like this. So both.
And Martin, just confirm there, you're doing left click, right? When you're moving left to right. Just want to make sure I clarify that for everybody.
So it's very intuitive. It's much more streamlined. And again, you can zoom in either using these plus minus buttons, or you can use your mouse wheel, which is what I'm going to do right now. I'm just using my mouse wheel to zoom in, zoom out, which is also very, very, very convenient.
And so that's again, where your cursor is. That's where your cursor is.
Yep. And another reason, again, you could have done this here previously, but that would take real estate from your screen. So you don't need to do that. We've streamlined it more, and you have these new ways of doing things. You can easily reset your view to this. I prefer seeing a bit more of the vertical zoom. You will notice other things here. For example, the header of each section in the Segway editor follows the theme. That means that it's just easier to visually understand what kind of an event you're looking for. You know that this is a song in blue and this yellow thing is a link.
Yeah.
And so it follows your theme. It looks just like the log event in the logs module. So again, there's a visual connection. The colors follow. The icon is there. So that's another nice thing. Speaking
Martin,
of,
I want to clarify one thing too, by the way, because I know a lot of users always ask this. You look at the sine wave, and a lot of users will kind of see that and go, "Oh, wait a second, my levels are all off. I have to zoom vertically my elements. Do I have to adjust the volume points and all of that?" Just to clarify, remember, Zetta has station-specific normalization. So even though your sine waves might look a little different, they're going to play out at the end at the same level. So just in case you saw that and you're like, "Oh, wow, my sine waves, I have to do 5 clicks to make it look maximum," or whatever it is. Don't forget, there's station-specific normalization. That's going to fix that down the air chain. So sorry, Martin, just want to make sure we clarify that.
Very well. I think we are almost done here, but before we leave, one last thing here. You'll now notice that we are actually showing the chain icon on the section in the Segway editor itself. Not only we show it to you, so that's the column here from the logs module, but we also allow you to modify it from here. So I can go from my auto post chain to a Segway chain, just like this. And when I save it, that change is going to get reflected into the logs module. If I change my mind, I want to go back to what I had, auto post, and save. Again, you see it immediately in the logs, and it's great in the sense that when you do these changes, you can immediately see the impact of that chain change. So it's especially useful for these different kind of chain types, such as auto post. You can immediately see how you can post against these songs intro. So that's also super handy. So some really nice enhancements in this area. Any questions?
Let's see. So far, nothing just yet. But if you do have any questions, as I said, Martin, so we're trying to wrap up a little bit here. So if you have any questions for Martin or myself or any of the 5.22.1 new features in Zetta, let us know. We're recapping all of the brand new features in the beta version of Zetta 5.22.1, which is available right now if you want it. The official release is what, in 3 weeks? End of September?
About a month. We'll see based on the feedback we're getting from our beta sites.
Nice. And of course, you can always become a beta site. Reach out to your local RCS contact. I'm more than happy to help you out. And we're chugging along here. So last call for questions for Martin, too. So go ahead, Martin.
Okay. Well, the next thing is back to config. This time we're going to computer config. For many years, we had a feature function called localization, local cache. The main purpose of that is to, on a per computer basis, having some options to cache audio locally. And then the main purpose of that is to avoid playback of your audio over the network. There may be multiple reasons. Latency. It's just easier to play a file that's, if you're firing hotkeys, for example, it's just easier to play a file that is on local drive, on local fast SSD versus sitting on some network shared drive, which may be busy. Maybe the network's busy. Maybe the network isn't reliable. So in general, it's preferable for quality of audio and the responsiveness of audio playback. It's always better to have audio cached on the local machine. Now we've had options for that. But we've recently, in this version, drastically improved this configuration, and we give you tons of new options. It started with you just specifying where your local cache is on this machine, and we tell you immediately how much of a free space you have in that path on this machine. I'll have like 23 gig left, and then the fun starts. You can obviously choose not to use local caching at all. It would be the default setting. But if it's a on-air critical machine, you probably want to enable this. And when you enable this, you have two options. You can either localize the entire library. If I pick that option, we'll tell you, well, great, but keep in mind, we'll show you in red that doing that would consume 6.2 terabyte. And we certainly don't have that on little SSD on this machine. So you don't want to do this. And we tell you that this is not a great idea in red. So this is the best option, station related. You say, well, I just need audio on this computer that pertains to a specific station or stations.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we have all these other options. And you can either have the system kind of automatically figure out what audio needs to be active or loaded, downloaded, cached to this computer based on the configuration. Based on the existing configuration, we know what stations air from this computer, and we can therefore figure out for you. So every time you make a change here, we'll do the math and tell you the amount of audio, the amount of required space that's going to be needed for the stations that are configured to play from this computer.
Mm-hmm.
Or you have ability to also explicitly specify stations.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives you another layer of
station groups as well. So if you have, for example, a production machine that you want to house as a backup for 2 or 3 stations in your cluster, you can do that here.
Yep. So you can either specify specific or define specific stations or big station groups, which is even more powerful. And so this is, and if you have around these little eyes, it'll tell you what stations we think we're handling from this computer. Mm-hmm. So it tells you that information as well. So it's pretty great already. And it already tells me, okay, if you do this, not a great idea because you need 24 gig of audio, which is slightly more than the free space that I have. So it's already telling all that intelligence.
Look at that change dynamically, by the way.
Yep. You're getting close. You don't want to do this. So you should be comfortable with this. And then when we know what stations you're going to be processing this computer, you can say, well, what type of audio do you want to get localized? And you can just say, well, everything on all those stations, period, mm-hmm. done. But you can drill down further. You can say, well, just only the audio that's scheduled in logs, whatever was in the log in the past 24 hours and what's coming up in the next 6 hours, for example. Everything that's on hotkeys that's tied to this station or these stations. Same with Stags module. Then we can look at stations full category and make sure all of that audio is localized. We can look at the spot block fill category, make sure all of that audio is localized. And we can look at rotation, stags, and imaging. If you use these features, you probably want to make sure all of that audio is localized as well. So you have tons of options. It really comes down to knowing what stations we are processing this computer and what audio tied to those stations need to be on this machine. So it's extremely powerful, more than anything we've ever had. Again, this is not a great this particular configuration. I need 280 gig of storage to accommodate these settings. So like I said, it's super handy because it changes dynamically and you immediately have a good idea about, as of right now, what kind of a storage do I need to have?
Yeah. And just to recap, again, this is the locally cached audio there. Again, red is bad. You don't have enough space for locally cached audio. Yellow means you're nearing the warning because obviously if I, evolving station, I'm always adding audio. That's the number right here is a snapshot, but you might get close to it. And then the red, of course, means you don't have enough space to back up those assets. So cool stuff. I was gonna say,
Okay.
speaking of which, you wanna do the imaging fallback, which is
Yep.
I'm really excited about
Yep.
personally.
I'm getting there. So let's just create a new one. Gonna call this Nate. So what is imaging? Maybe very quick recap. It's
Mhm,
part of the three separate features called tags, rotations, and imaging. We've had these for many years, and they are kind of a similar. They all are in a way a rotation where you have a bunch of elements, and each time that tag or rotation or imaging plays, we're gonna rotate. We're gonna travel through those specific elements. It's like these, for example, and every time you replace something, we advance this pointer to the next guy, and we just keep on rotating through these guys. So that's a popular feature that's used in many contexts. Throughout Zetta is used in the satellite, formerly satellite mode. Now we call it network mode. It's used
mhm.
in splits. It used for traffic when you just call for spot X, and behind that we have 10 different versions of audio that rotate underneath that ID. So it's used throughout all these places. Now, one of the requests we were receiving, and it came from you on behalf of U.S. clients, and it came from Europe on behalf of European clients, and we even got it from Asia Pac on behalf of clients over there. So the request was, well, if a rotation doesn't resolve, I wanted to try something else. If it fails to resolve, the audio is not there, or maybe it's not active, the run dates are not met, we haven't entered the run dates window yet, or the run date window already expired. We just want, if you cannot resolve, we want to kind of a fallback to something else. And so we really came up with this idea where we said, well, why don't we just kind of a revisit how we do this thing all together, and try to make this better for everything. So
Mhm,
we completely revamped this imaging window. I'm creating this new Nate imaging here,
mhm,
and this window can now do everything you could do through tags and rotations and imaging previously. So this is kind of a now umbrella feature that is going to, at some point in the future, completely obsolete tags rotations, because it already has the functionality. So we just want to give people an opportunity to play with it, and at some point in the future, we're just going to hide and remove tags and rotations completely. So what you can do, you have these assignment contexts here on the left. There's a station context, station, a virtual station, kind of the same thing. There's a shared rotation context, and finally shared rotation through station groups. And what these really somewhat represent what tags, rotations, and imagings were before. You have all these contexts where you can define or assign audio. I'll start with a simple station. I'll pick my station that I use,
mhm.
and it's empty by default. So I need to put some audio in. Um,
And notice that very helpful guide there on the associated assets. We try to help you throughout the software with hovering over tool tips and stuff like that. So,
yep, exactly. So in fact, if on the station I have three shifts that I may or may not want to use, it depends completely on you. I also have this always there's this station rotation, so I can assign audio to this context here on a station rotation.
mhm,
And right now, when this imaging, this Nate imaging plays, it will start and here. This is like the first and last thing we'll try to play. However, I can have contexts, or I can add content to different levels. If you use shifts, for example, I can add stuff here on individual shifts, and based on your current and default shift, we can now let you kind of fall back through these levels.
mhm.
Let me scroll to the shared rotation. This is kind of a rotation for all the stations. If I put some content here, and I'll go back to our station, and you can ignore this.
And notice, by the way, here, so we got
Mhm.
organized based on a very granular outline here. So we can totally go and do this at the shift level, the station group level, the global level.
Right.
And notice how it's very nice and organized here for you. On the left-hand side, there's even a little filter there. So you can type into filter if you have a lot of stations. You can just search by the station itself. And then we outline it in the center in the fallback order with the what is next to play on the right-hand side.
So I made some additional configurations. Now we have three levels up to 3 levels of fallbacks. If we'll start with the current shift or the default shift, and they will be falling back to the station collection, and finally to what is all stations. So this is the fallback. This icon kind of kicks in every time we fail to resolve. If I fail to resolve these two guys on a station level, we will try and fall back to the next level, which is all stations. So that's these four. There's up to 4 levels of fallbacks. Yeah, we only see 3 because it didn't populate the others. But we kind of let you start on the shift level, then we go to the station, the kind of default station rotation level, and when we fell there, we can fall back to the what we call a shared rotational station group. So this is actually a rotation that may apply to multiple stations. You can have this shared rotation across multiple stations, and they all can fall back to the same list of items. So it's extremely powerful because you have all these assignment contexts here on the left, and all these fallback order levels for each station, and you know exactly at any point what is it going to try next if it fails to resolve on a specific level.
Yeah. And Amir, I see you checked in from Malaysia. Thank you for checking in. Marianne, I see your question as well. Just want to double check. When you mean projected turnover maps, are we talking about right from this window in the imaging or somewhere else in the software? Just want to make sure I'm clarifying.
Projected turnover sounds more like a G-selector feature than a Zetta feature.
Yeah, I have a feeling Marianne might be asking is how do we know which element? If you could go back for a second, Martin, there. Thank you. She might be asking, like, what's the projected turnovers of those rotations? And you have to realize that the way this is designed is a fallback. So you'll have your generic scheduled pieces of imaging there in this window. And if there isn't something to play in that level 1, be it hour restrictions, run dates, just people haven't added the audio yet, whatever it could be, then we're going to go and then go to level 2. If there's something level 2, we go to level 3 and so on and so forth. And we establish what are those levels in which order, and we have what is next to play. There's obviously, of course, you can resolve those in the Zetta log editor as well, so you can see what those turnovers are going to be. But a little bit different behavior of scheduling projected turnovers versus essentially fallbacking if I have something scheduled and nothing is there. Also note too, by the way, Martin, I've already had like 2 or 3 phone calls with clients talking about this feature, which is so cool. And again, we do imaging here, we do splits, but this can also just be station specific. And I have a couple users who have shows, and they have, again, a Sunday morning jazz brunch show, something like that, or whatever it is. And what you can call for in the log is the generic imaging piece. And then from there, you can have level 1, 2, 3 be past shows. What happened was there was a user who had, I don't want to call this guy out, but he had some shows that may or may not have come in for whatever reason. And they wanted to have this exact, fallback in case emergency. They want a peace of mind to know that if I don't have my show for this Sunday, I can go back to a show of my desired choice. And of course, we can keep on going back from there too. So there's a lot of really cool things you can do with this. It's a very powerful tool, very granular, as you can see with the fallback order. I am personally really excited for this feature. And I think, Marianne, that was good, right, Marianne? Cool. Answered your question. Perfect. Thank you. Awesome. Sorry, Martin, keep going.
Sounds good. Yeah. So this is something I would definitely invite people to play with because it's very powerful, and it has all these fallback levels. In the case of something fails to resolve, there's another level you can try with, and the levels are kind of different. So some are station specific, some are shared across different stations. So it gives you all that power, all that flexibility. Next
and
thing,
by the way, and give you a little props here to Martin and Mike and the rest of the Zetta team. They really went through extensive amount of user examples on this. So you might see this and go, well, I don't use shifts, or I don't use this, or I don't use station groups, whatever it is. But look how granular that is. I mean, from the station, shift, station groups, global, there is going to be whatever example that you think that you can throw at us. I'm telling you, Martin and his team have figured it out. It's a really, really powerful tool. Sorry.
Yep.
That's all I'll say about that. Very excited, as you can tell.
So am I. Not only we get all the fallback functionality, all the optional levels. This really can be as difficult or as sophisticated as you want it to be. So it can be very simple still, or it can be really powerful, really, detailed and granular. So that's one thing. The other thing is that not only you have all these fallback levels, but we've consolidated the experience between text, rotations, imaging. Now you don't have to think about, well, which one do I use for this? I don't really know which one is the right one. It's all covered by this hopefully streamlined configuration.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the next thing I wanted to mention is, and we kind of go between config and the user experience. For many years now, Zetta has supported dozens of audio formats. We just support just about anything that's out there. Honestly, I don't think there's an audio format that's commonly used audio format that we do not support. We support for playback. For playback, we support everything. Now for actually conversions, that was a different story. That was a way less. You really only had a couple of options here, and that was it. Now this changes with this version. Now before I go into this further, you do not need to convert audio when you import stuff into Zetta. Our playback engine is so advanced that where you can easily mix different audio formats, different sample rates, different bit rates, different bit depths, different. What did I think I covered everything. It's just every audio property you don't have to worry about. It's you can mix and match all these without any concern. So honestly, the best is you do not have to convert anything ever on Ingest to Zetta. So while we do have these features where you can define an asset or the audio format per asset type, you actually don't have to do this. There may be reasons at times, and I will not go into that right now, but most of the time you actually don't have to do that. You can easily take the raw audio file that you have and load it into Zetta as is without any conversions. Now that said, we do support conversions and functionality where you export stuff from Zetta. You publish audio, you want to backend recorder can record, and you want to convert that to something else than linear. So that's when you probably do want to use this functionality. Maybe you're ripping a CD and you don't want to be linear. So for CDs, CD ripping, you want to use a specific format here. So there are use cases where conversion is useful. There's no doubt about that. And what we did here, we said, well, rather than kind of hard coding endless amount of formats, we let people customize, define what audio format they want to use. Any standard audio format already comes or offers what is called a command line implementation of the encoder. I'm looking at Vorbis for now. The command line implementation of that is enc2. So you can create these custom encoders, these custom audio format encoders. And for each, you just supply the encoder that you want to use. You specify the parameters, which you need to find out. You go to the help file for the encoder itself, such as quality of the encoding, bitrate that the file is going to get, and off you go. You can use these custom formats throughout the system for backend recorder, for publishing, or in any of these other contexts. So you're not limited to the ones that we've been shipping so far, such as MPEG,
which is
MP3,
a lot, by the way.
AC, but you are now complete king of the castle, and by the ability of being able to supply your own encoders.
And the two things I want to say there is, number one, notice how, a lot of times when I talk about, new users in Zetta and the kind of the scope of what you can do in there, and we try to have and provide for you a couple examples of a couple different options of how you want to interpret that workflow. And notice how the way we design this, I say we, but it's really you guys. We designed this based on, it's not just we'll add each one of these individually and keep on going from there. We made the conscious decision to go and say, why are we going to focus on each individual format? Let's create a custom with an encoder and then give you the world is your oyster. And to Martin's credit, I've already had, just last week, I was talking with a new Zetta user, and he's an audiophile, and he wanted to have this very unique audio setup. And I'm like, it just so happens that in 5.22.1, we have this new custom audio. And he was like, that is so cool. So yeah, again, really, really cool stuff there if you're looking for a very unique audio format.
So speaking of audio and your audio processing, we have next feature is enhancement of what we had for many years. The feature is under system config. The current implementation still exists under system config audio processing. It's called voice track settings for trim in and trim out. And this is super useful, super handy. Anytime you voice track, you don't want to have a lead in silence at the beginning or lead out silence at the end, because voice tracks typically duck the surrounding audio. This could be song intro, so song outro, and you want it to only start ducking when the DJ actually starts talking. So the auto trimming is super useful, is super heavily used. Now, what we've been receiving were requests where they were saying, "Well, this is all great, but we need to be more granular." And so we now did add these options for the voice track auto trimming also on the station level. And while we were there, we kind of revamped the configuration a little bit. We used to have separate tabs for normalizations, for ducking. Now on the station config, we just have audio processing tab, just like on system config, and it has similar things. If you go to audio processing on the station, not only you have the normalization settings and the ducking settings, but you also now see the new voice track settings. And if you don't do anything, it'll just keep on following the system defined the global parameters of auto trims. That's the default. However, you can also have the option to either disable it completely for the station if you choose to, or again, probably the option you want to use, just make it station specific. In which case, when you set this, you can now define these parameters for trim in threshold and trim out threshold per station.
Which again, Martin, I got to give you props where props is due. I was talking to another client just the other day, and that was the exact feature. And I forgot that it was brand new. So I was just like, oh, just go over this one setting and adjust this. And he's like, I don't have it. I'm like, oh, that's right. You're on 5.21.2. It's time to become a beta user and get that new feature. So
right. Yeah. Features are same for me. Listen, I have it too. I think we've had a feature for a while, and to realize that it's just been released in a version because we are working ahead, so you don't necessarily see all the things we're working on. And if it's a feature that we worked on a few months ago, I may think it's been released, even though it's not the case. And that is the case for our next feature. For quite a while, we had the ability for cue points. If you define cue points, if you ever need to define cue point is basically a command you want to execute at certain position within the audio. On that cue point, you were always able to lock it. What this would do is, if you load new audio to this asset, and oftentimes you have a new audio coming in all the time, but the cue points you want to persist. You could, per cue point, say, I wanted this one to stay. I don't want it to be removed when the new audio comes in. Normally, new audio comes in, all this stuff goes away because we assume that everything has changed. But sometimes that at 10 seconds within the audio, this happens, you want to get this cue point executed. So you have the ability to log these cue points. And this, like I said, this existed for a while now. The part that did not exist is the actual marking points and the ability to log the cue points there. So now you can log any of these marking points as well. You just right click and say locked. And at that point, you load new audio, the trim in, the trim out, the intro, segue, any of these marks that we have can survive and continue to survive every time you load the new audio.
I know we had one client that wanted a spot or whatever it was $59.99, something like that. And you can do that, just lock it and call it a day.
Yeah. So I'll touch the remaining ones very briefly. We've significantly improved the performance of autoload. It just swallows the audio much faster than it ever has.
1 second, when I'll be right back. Go ahead.
And while at it, if you have the one computer process multiple autoloads, you now have ability to assign priority levels, where you can say, well, any audio that comes into this folder needs to be processed first before any of the other audio in other folders. So if you have a autoload folder that contains news and traffic, weather, you probably need to get into the system sooner than some song that you just kind of can get at any point. So that's another nice enhancements for the autoload. And finally, I'll go back to the metadata card for just a bit. We in previous versions we created a notion of virtual events that's used for long form recording audio files. If you have a 2-hour show recording, you may want to indicate where within that recording where individual events actually start, where songs start, for example, where promos or some other station imaging starts. And so we've had that ability for a couple of versions. Now, what we did here, we are trying to actually improve the ability or the management of defining these virtual these virtual events. And I'll go to that tab, and let's just say that within this audio, this is not a long form recording, but for the purposes of demo, it will work. I can just take a link here. I'll hide the Segway editor so that we don't get too much screen noise. And I can drag and drop and drop it anywhere within that waveform. I can immediately see, hey, there's the link at this position. Now, you might have noticed as I was doing it, you actually, as I was dragging, dropping, you already hear the underlying audio. So during that process, we already kind of show you what is at that point in audio. So it's much easier to fine tune the placement of these events. I'll do that again. So this is where I want to pick. That's exactly the little trumpet I was looking for. So that's where I'm going to drop this element. And so this is now not only have a better visual here for what's actually inside, because we show you the colors, the themes, and the icons, but you can easily hear the audio as you're positioning, as you're placing the audio. And if you want to adjust it later, you can easily drag and drop this, and while you're doing it, again, you're going to hear the audio.
Wow.
And so not only is this useful for virtual events, but it's also handy when you define traditional marking points.
I was going to say, if only if you had, if only you had, I don't know, something like a hour-long mix show, and you want to lock in the cue points for the RDS of the brand new song, you don't know where it is, you can just go ahead, find it, lock that point.
And one last thing, since we're on the metadata card, I wanted to show you that if you use the participants tab, you want to define who is, who worked on this piece of work, on this song, on this classical piece. You can, we kind of change this user experience quite a bit. You can define, if you always use, say, vocalist for participants, you can actually make vocalist your default participant. And by doing that, you can simply right-click. When you pull this down and you right-click this option, we're going to make it your default from this point onwards. And so every time I hit plus, I'm going to create vocalist automatically. You don't have to create an empty row. That's what it was before. Before it would be like you create an empty row. Well, now, so now we don't even let you create empty row. It's like you inline decide. I can no longer show you the previous experience because we revamped it. But you just click the plus, and we immediately give you the options. I want to do producer. But if you know that 95% of the time you're going to use a vocalist, you can just make the default, and then every time you hit plus, you're going to give you vocalist. But if those 5% you want to use, say, a lyricist, you can still pull this down and pick lyricist. Or you can go back in and modify it from here. So it's just one thing I wanted to mention, that this has been revamped, and there's this notion of picking the default action, and that's by right-clicking it. That's going to be your default until you change it again. And we do support it in other places in Zetta 2. So if a button has multiple features, multiple functions, you can pick your default action by right-clicking it in the combo. And that's all.
Zetta behavior, by the way. That's an Audition in a couple of places with multi-track editor to save.
True. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's see, Martin. I know I tried to tell you 30 minutes or so. We're at 45 here. So anything that we wanted just to skim and touch base on, as always, for a full list of these features, you can check the release notes, reach out to support, or become a beta user yourself. Don't forget, of course, our studio spotlight over at marketing@rcsworks.com. We're hiring as well for the career page at rcsworks.com. Some really great positions there. One, I believe, is also on the Zetta team, not mistaken. Anything else we want to mention before we head out? And last call for questions here, but anything we might have missed, Martin?
Well, there's plenty, but I wanted to try and see if we can squeeze it into 30 minutes. I failed at that. I apologize.
No.
There's just so much to show.
It's an 8:30, which is a typical 45. I mean, everybody who works at RCS knows that once I give myself a time limit, you got to go a little extra because I like to talk. So, but this has been phenomenal. So, Martin, thank you so much for spending the time here. This is great. And of course, if you missed this, yeah, Tom, thanks for checking in. Tom was saying, looking forward to the release. So, any of these details and stuff, you can let us know. We're more than happy to help you out there. Release notes, become a beta user, all of that good stuff. You can check out this video always on our archive over at rcsworks.com/rcs-live. I will see you next Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. We got a G Selector 5.1 new features coming in the pipeline as well. Really exciting stuff. So, Martin, thank you so much for spending the time. And let me make sure your last one here. Marianne, thank you, Marianne. Thanks for checking in. Thanks. Great question there, Marianne. And we'll see you next Thursday. Have a great day. Bye-bye, everybody.